Great. I will start then. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining tonight. My name is Izzy Kirkby, and I support the Association of Master Herbalists with their CPD program. And I'm really excited to actually have Andrew Mason, who is a council member for the Association of Master Herbalists. But not only that, he's incredibly talented. I've been in awe of his work for years. He does alchemy, he does astrology, but also is an incredible iridologist, which he's been studying for over 20 years and is the leading behavioural iridologist in the UK. So I'm really grateful that Andrew has come to do a talk for us tonight, basically explaining, iridology in general, but also how you can use iridology in practice as a health practitioner. And if you are really interested in this, and I'm sure you all will be, because there's so much, Andrew's got slides and everything, so we'll be learning lots of stuff that we can take away straight away. But if you do want to learn more, then Andrew is also doing an in-depth introduction, sort of foundational course in behavioural iridology, which I'll be sending a link to if anyone wants to join that, which starts on Wednesday, and he will be offering everyone that joins a really good discount. Actually, it's already super cheap, but everyone that signs up will get 10% discount. So I'll send you the links and the coupon codes if you are interested in that. But even if you're not, I will hand over to Andrew, because he's got so much information to share tonight. And if you have questions, just pop them in the chat, and we'll leave time for Q&A afterwards. And I think that covers everything for now. So I will hand over to Andrew. So thank you so much for joining us, Andrew.
Thank you, Izzy. Thank you, everyone, for coming along. I'll try and whistle through this fairly quickly if I can. There's quite a lot to show. I think basically I'll just start very quickly with my background, or how I got interested in this. I actually discovered a very small paperback in a bookshop in the middle of nowhere years and years ago. This is like mid-90s, and it was a small book on iridology, and I didn't know anything about it. I had no prior interest, and I just picked it up. It was very cheap, so a secondhand bookshop. Had a read of it and got quite interested in it, and from there I was able to find sort of more advanced work, read that, get more into it, like you do, you sort of stepping stone from one thing to the next. And then I was talking to a homeopathic friend of mine, actually, and I mentioned this book, and he said, oh, there's amazing things you can tell from the eye. It's not just about health, you can tell personality. And I thought, oh, that sounds even more amazing. So to cut a long story short, it eventually led me to what was at that time, end of the 90s, beginning of the 2000s. I think that the early version of this, if you like, was the RAID method, which is still going. I mean, it's still taught in some semblance, but I got to know one of the RAID masters really well, and he kind of broke away from the organization. His name was Jim Burgess, and he broke away from that organization, and we kind of went on together to develop behavioral iridology. So we took elements of the work that he'd been doing, some of the work I'd been doing, and of course, some foundational work from RAID, and then that kind of birthed the behavioral system. So that's kind of where I came from, my kind of background or interest in it. What I liked about this system it's not that you can't say one's better than the other. You have a kind of a physical model, which is looking more at health, and behavioral, which is looking more at the behavioral side of things. But what I liked about the behavioral model was everything that I was shown before in the physical model, which was actually could be a bit detrimental or a bit worrying, or if you see some sign in the eye, you get nervous about it. If you see any kind of structure, you think, oh my God, what does that mean? That kind of gets turned on its head in this model, because basically everything in the eye is there, has beneficial qualities. It's good for you. It's there to change your life. It's there to enable you to overcome things, to sort of, fight back challenges and all that kind of thing. So it sort of turned that whole physical model on its head. So that's not to say that, it's not to say that one is better than the other. They're just different approaches to the iris. And, as we'll see in a minute, I'll show you how you can use, I think what we'll do is we'll spend the first third, if you like, just going over the system, because obviously I know a lot of you will be iridologists, but you may not all be iridologists. So let me just go a little bit over how the system works and, what we're looking at. And then as we move forward, we'll look at a little bit more in-depth material. And then towards the end, we'll go into how that could actually benefit you to know on a constitutional level, what type of person you have in front of you. So without further ado, let me just share my screen. Yeah, make sure I do this right, Izzy. Shout if I get it wrong, yeah? Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Good. Look at that. Okay, so what is iridology? So obviously a lot of...
Do you want to make it full screen?
Oh, I do. Well, good point. Let's just make sure it actually changes. Make sure it changes slide when I tab forward. I don't want to leave everyone behind. Oops. Okay, so what is iridology? So as you can see there, we've got a nice iris to look at there. That's basically what we're looking at. We're looking at the colored part of the eye. Now, in this, in the behavioral model and in the physical model, we do sort of pay some, we'll study the whole iris as well. It's not just the iris, but primarily we're interested in the colored portion of the eye. So there you go. So we've got the pupil there. We've got this collarette around the outside. There's the actual iris edge, and then obviously the white of the eye. But this is the colored portion that we're looking at. That's our main focus in the system. Okay. So iridology, in the form that we recognize today, obviously there are references that say that people will, for instance, there's an Indian text that I've got that I quite often show people. It's written probably 400 BC, maybe a little bit later, but it talks about how to determine different things about the body by looking in the eye. So you could make a tentative argument that it's a sort of iridology, although they weren't specifically looking at the iris, they were looking at the whole eye. But let's just say in the form that we recognize today, it's been around for about 170 years. Okay, so we might term this the physical model because it's analyzing the physical conditions of the body, and it's based on a sort of different constitutional types. The behavioral model, as I'd said, it's been around for about 40 years, so it's a much newer system. But this system still uses the iris to understand, we're looking at exactly the same thing, but we're determining personality traits from that eye as well. And of course, we don't throw the physical side out. We're still considering all that. It's a kind of another layer of the work, but primarily this is, we're looking at the sort of the mind over the body rather than the body over the mind, if you know what I mean. Okay. So let's just quickly look at the physical model. So the physical model uses a constitution based on color. So the physical model of iridology uses a constitutional model based upon iris color. These are blue mixed. This is very basic stuff, but very basically blue, a mixed color, or brown. So the idea is here, somebody walks in, you determine the iris color, and then from there, let's say you could say bluish, then we'll assign a kind of more lymph, reactive immune system, or if it's a brown iris, it's going to be more brown, more blood and more circulatory, and then everything else that falls in between those two, because blue isn't really, it's not a color per se, it's just an effect, but we categorize it as a blue mixed and brown. So anything that falls in between the blue and the brown we'll call like a bile, and it's going to be more like a digestive thing. I mean, that's a very simplistic overview of how the physical model will determine or categorize a person by their iris color. But it goes further than that. So the physical model also makes use of iris maps. So the idea of this is that you simply overlay these maps over the top of the iris, and from that you can then correlate structure in the iris to structure in the body. Now, I've just picked 4 random iris maps here. There are many iris maps. To be honest, most of them are pretty much the same. There'll be a few variations, and obviously, practitioners like to take pride in the fact that it's their map and they've sort of discovered a little bit something extra that somebody else missed. So there's going to be a few variations in them, but on the whole, this is kind of more or less what you're going to get. You see some are quite simplistic. They're more about boxes and zones. Some are kind of, they don't have any demarcation. They're kind of just floating names. Others are kind of very regimented. Some are highly detailed. But that's basically the idea here. They're mapping the body by, you've got obviously your left and right iris, you're putting your map over the top, and you're looking for structure that's corresponding to areas on these maps. And then that in theory should reflect those parts of the body. Okay, so that in a very brief nutshell is the physical model and how it works, or the theory behind it. Okay, the behavioral model is a little bit different. What we're really looking at, or what we're interested in, is different types of structure in the iris. So what we're looking for is the regularity of the fiber, the compact quality of the fiber. You know, is it the fibers that make up the eye, are they very compact, close together, or they're very open, weavy, loose, you know, like you get a real sense of looseness, they're like there's a transparency there. Particularly when we see big openings in the fiber, that's a big one for us as well. If we see these big opening areas, these are called lacuna in iridology, but it just means like a pool or an opening or a space. And the last thing is these acquired pigments in the iris. These they used to be called psoric spots. I still call them psoric spots, and I get slapped on the wrist for calling them that. But you can say pigment patches and stuff like that. Don't worry about actually identifying these. We'll look at some photos in a bit, and then you can actually see what I'm talking about. But just know that in the behavioral model, we're more interested in structure than we're interested in iris color. Okay. Or I should say that color isn't completely irrelevant in the behavioral model, but it plays a smaller part. It's more like a modifier. We would add it as a sort of a like icing on the cake. It's just it would give us a little bit of extra information. Okay, so as I said, there's 3 constitutional types in the physical model. We only work with 2 constitutional types in the behavioral model. So there you go. That's even easier to learn. You only have to learn 2 instead of 3. So that's a benefit already. And what we're doing is we're categorizing people into two basic constitutions. We have an emotional feeling and we have a thinking analytical. Okay. So this on the left is a good example of an emotional feeling type. What we're looking for, think about emotions are kind of unpredictable, movement, energy, changing, you know, like it's dynamic, isn't it? So already you can see, look at the dynamic quality of this iris on the left. It's like lots of openings, it's wavy, everything's flowing. And we've got these big pockets, these big openings or big partings of the fiber. So you could think about these as like pockets of energy. They hold pockets of energy. They're like an empty space that's holding something, okay? And the counter side to that, or the balancing constitution, is the thinking analytical type. And this is a much more introverted, controlled, structural, holding together energy. It's like, it's kind of the opposite. It's tight, regimented, and the energy is moving in and condensing, okay? So what makes this a thinking type is the fact that there's lots of these colored spots in the eye. So we know that's indicating a thinking type. And if we have the open weave and the open petals or these open lacunas, that's our emotional type. Now it's not as simple as that, but that's a sort of a very simple level of how we're assessing. And this becomes the primary thing in the behavioral system is determining which side you're falling on. Are you some kind of emotional type? Are you some kind of thinking type? And so those are the kind of primary indicators. But I hear you cry, haha, you say, well, what happens if there's just fiber in there and there's none of these openings and there's no colored spots? Well, then we can still determine if it's a thinking or emotional type by the fact of how compact are the fibers. So if we were devoid of these openings and devoid of these color pigments, which I have to say is pretty unlikely, but in the event that we did see that, and there are some out like that, if they're very loose, if there's still a looseness to the fiber, we know that it's an emotional type. And if there's a compact quality to the fiber, we know it's a thinking type. So we could say, looking at these very quickly, I can see quite clearly that this is an emotional type because there are lots of openings and pockets. And on top of that, we have lots of loose, wavy, open fiber. So that's like a double whammy. We've got openings and we've got loose fiber. And conversely, on this side, you can see we've got lots and lots of pigment patches or these sora everywhere, and the fiber is very tight and regimented. So that's a double whammy the other way. It's a thinking type because it's got spots, but also the iris fiber is very tight and compact. Okay, so that's our 2 constitutions that we're working with. Okay, so people might say, well, hang on a minute, what about these brown-eyed types? You get a type like this walk into your office and you're trying to think, yikes, where are we going with this? Is this thinking or is this emotional? Well, the good news is with the advent of digital photography and editing software, we can actually see. I mean, we can't remove the color, but we can work with images like this and lighten them up. So although we look at this and just essentially we're looking at 2 brown discs, if I hit the magic button and lighten it, there we go. So that's just literally applied a lightening, or what they call a dodge filter. So just brighten up the fibers. I can see it actually, there's quite a lot of these openings. There's a lot of these lacuna in here. Now, some are very close to this they're very close to the pupil, but we'll still count them because we can see the looseness. You see how I've, just by lightening that, we've got, maybe it's not so clear on your screen, but it's quite, I can see clearly that this is a, this is an emotional type. Okay, so just know that with very dark brown eyes, with the advent of digital photography, at least you're going to be able to work with that as well. But you quite often find if you sidelight an eye, or if you've got like the old, you know, the old magnifier and the loop, if you sort of get in there closely, you can still determine. Okay, so it's not that we have to write off brown eyes, and there are other tips and tricks we can use to identify as well, but we won't go into that here. That's something I've saved for the course. Okay, so. And we also have our own iris map as well. Just like the physical system, we also have an iris map, only this time we're correlating personality traits instead of the physical traits that we use in the physical map. So we're looking at personality traits, emotions, and very interestingly, ancestral influences. This is because we primarily read the left eye as the mother and the mother's family and that mother's lineage, and the right eye is the father and the father's lineage. So there's an ancestral component in that as well. And it all gets, once we get into this inner area, once we move into the final third of the iris close to the pupil, or into the intuitive zone, the sort of subconscious area, this is all like heavily influenced by ancestral family influences as well. So we look to here to be, this is a sort of specifically connected with that ancestral influence. So lots and lots of things to look at. And again, you know, there is a physical map that I use that correlates with this map. So again, you can still look at the iris positions to see how the physical and the behavioral kind of layer on top of each other. So for instance, you know, like the heart area is the same as the physical. So heart and heart voice is like the kind of, you've got that thyroid area. Anger is like the liver, gallbladder. So there's a crossover as well between, you can even look at the organs and then the energetic between or behind organs, you know, thinking like, what's the classic ones, like lungs, like grief, isn't it? And pancreas, jealousy, and anger, the liver. So all those things cross over as well. There's lots and lots of richness, and we've got a lot of material we can draw on as well. So layering the two systems, that's why I say we don't throw physical out and just say, oh, we won't use it at all. It's there as a sort of a shadow or something that ghosts behind the emotional, and we can still fall back on that as well for extra information. Okay, so this is going to be way more than we'll go into tonight. But what I've done here is this is the map, if you like, or the kind of the tool that we use to dissect. So it's a series of concentric rings. So the idea here is that the behavioral model is best represented by a series of concentric rings. So as you move towards the center of the diagram, iris structure is interpreted more specifically. So the sort of constitutional, you know, determining thinking or feeling is the outer ring, and they're the biggest parts of the map. You can see, you know, this whole side is dedicated to emotional, this whole side to thinking. So that's the kind of primary thing we need to determine. Is it some kind of thinking person, or is it some kind of emotional person? And then we can start adding in our effects. I won't go into the effects today. It's too much. We haven't got time to do that. But then we can determine effects. This is you could think of the driver effect as going faster, and the empathic effect as going slower. So that's like, you know, how we know that they're, for instance, we could say we know that they're a feeling emotional type, but have they got their foot on the pedal and they're accelerating, or have they got their foot on the brake and they're slowing down? That's what those two effects tell us. And then inside of that ring, we've got our social types. We can determine there are 4 sort of social types that make up society, you know, where, like what careers would suit them, or what kind of social interactions they do better in, those kind of things. And then finally, we're into our modifiers, things like iris color. What difference is that going to make to the personality? The expression ring. This is another ring that we look at in the eye that's close to the pupil that tells us if they're kind of more outward and expressive, or they're more introverted and holding back. Then there are many other types of iris ring that we look at. We have 6 rings, 3 on each side, that balance each other. So energetically, they modify the personality as well, kind of speed up, make more dynamic, slow down, make more constricted. They're all kind of like modifiers. And then finally, we've got individual iris positions, because of course, every eye is going to be different, and you might have structure where no one else has got it, or structure in certain parts of the eye mean different things. That's why we would get more specific as we move in through those rings. So you can see in terms of a model between the physical and the behavioral, there's a lot of similarity. They both have a constitutional model. They both use maps. The behavioral is obviously looking at behavioral and the physical, but the physical, in some respects, people might say, okay, so they're looking at a liver position in the physical modeling, still might relate that back to anger or something. So there's a little bit of crossover between the two systems. Okay, so let's just go back to these primary types. The two primary constitutions are universal. So everyone here tonight will fall on one side of the spectrum. You're either going to be some type of emotional feeling, or you're going to be a thinking analytical type. Okay. Now, there are many eyes out there, and determining that is not always easy. On the whole, it's fairly easy. I would say in 50% of the cases, it's going to be quite obvious what constitution they are. 25% of the time, it's going to take a little bit more thought, and then you're going to get those last sort of 25% where you're going to need the skill set to sort of take it apart, because two things could be happening. There could just be irises that are devoid of lots of structure. So like we gave that example earlier of, if we had no colored patches and we had no openings, how could we determine constitution? Well, then we're going back to the quality of the iris fiber. So that's when you'd have to know on a scale, is this loose or is this compact? There's a sort of a scale that you would learn that would help you determine. Or you can just reach a point where, let's say you've got an equal amount of lacuna or these openings and an equal amount of psora. So how do you decide which side they're going to fall on? So again, that's where we have a counting technique which sort of works out which side of the fence they're going to fall on. And then of course we can still look at the iris fiber in the background to see whether that's pushing it one way or the other. So lots and lots of little tips and tricks. And but like I said, for the most part, you're going to be able to determine. I don't think it's going to be that difficult. Okay, so we've done the two primary constitutions. So let's have a look at some of the qualities of these, and let's see what's coming up. So what I've done is I've given some qualities, the sort of long-term life lessons of the structure, their fears, signs of imbalance, and then their kind of gifts or, things that they bring to the table, they're the sort of gifts that they're bearing, if you like. So qualities wise, generally, remember we're talking generally here, every eye is specific, but if we take the emotional type as a general, more extroverted, outgoing, spontaneous, imaginative, creative, highly developed auditory intake, very visually expressive. So like to listen to things and the eyes kind of shut down more, but they are animated. There's lots of movement. They attract, they're like the sort of something like that creates attention in the room, but it's almost like the auditory is going out. The eyes are sort of like shutting down, but they're kind of waving around. They're getting everybody else's attention. So you can imagine that all that energy that's pouring into that iris, it's filling all the energy is kind of pouring out of the pupil, radiating across the iris, and it's all getting collected in these little pockets. And they're all filling up with all this, welling up with all this energy, explosive energy, and they want to, get excited, and they're imaginative and creative. So it tends to dissipate very quick. There's a high energy loss. It's like high energy use, but high energy loss. So the long-term life lesson, anything that slows down and organizes and focuses that. And so you'll see when we look at its opposite constitution, they'll all be the opposite. So the opposite constitution is the balancing factor. Okay, so let's just stick with the emotional at the moment. So when they plan, get clear about things, take responsibility, act with certainty, and patience is a big one as well. Not wanting, just like not foot to the floor and going at full belt and just taking it all as it comes. When they kind of meter, a more methodical, balanced, then all of these things that we've talked about, this kind of imagination, creativity, these all explode and go through the roof because they've got a constant source of energy. They're not depleting all the time. Okay. So the fears of this type, well, if you think all that energy just leaving, it's just like the blasting out, pocketing, expanding, and then just being lost. So the fears, being alone, feeling abandoned, being left behind, lost, we're losing everything, running out of food, running out of energy, it's all just being left and forgotten. And when that happens, the imbalanced quality of this, what roars back into that empty space is emptiness. And then they get sort of, feeling depressed, feeling alone, sad, become angry, blaming, it's all everybody else's fault. It's not my fault. They left me, it's all kind of abandoned. So those are the kind of signs. If you get an emotional type and they're coming in, there's a lot of blame, there's a lot of anger, feeling kind of very needy or depressed. Like depression's a big one. So you can sort of say, okay, this constitution is in a state of imbalance. There's been too much energy loss. It's not being revitalized. The spaces aren't being refilled in the iris. So the gifts that they bring, so this is their great benefit: creativity, spontaneity, imagination, and connecting everybody, bringing everybody together, connecting ideas, creating things that, that everybody can enjoy. And spontaneity, isn't it? Breaking the deadlock, that they are the sort of the random connection that suddenly comes up with a new idea and sends everybody in a new direction. So it keeps things spontaneous and creative. Okay, so let's look at the opposite. So quite easy to remember these constitutions, because this whole system is based on a system of balance, right? So whatever is good for one is going to be they're going to be drawing from their opposite all the time. So it's based on this sort of left and right polarity all the time. So generally thinking type, we can see it's thinking type because we've got the colored spots in there again. Much more introverted. This is an analytical, detail orientated type. Okay, verbally expressive, likes to talk a lot, very precise, lots of organization, clarity, forward planning. Highly developed visual intake, but love being vocally expressive. So watching what everybody's doing, studying everything, and then be able to express that in words, being very clear, focusing, making sure everybody's doing what being told to do the right things, is kind of directing everybody, and they've got that good. It's very, very quick, kind of watching with the eye. It's all very, the patterns all down, and then they just literally can explain it very clearly, and, just natural orators, stuff like that. So life lessons, so it's the opposite. They're learning, they're too constrictive. There's too much energy going in, there's too much containment. So they're looking for more like spontaneity, openness, allowing and flowing. When they let go, when they act more like their opposite or integrate more of the opposite into their life, they give themselves that space to let go, to relax. I mean, this is a structure that's just building too much all the time. So if they can relax, let go, and their energy can flow, and then they actually get more clear and the greater clarity, but there's not that urgency, that sort of like hurried feeling all the time to sort of try and get everything that's going, just understand everything instantaneously. So the big fears with this type: being criticized, judged, or to be shown in error. Obviously, they like to get everything right, like to get all their ducks in a row, get all their information right. So it's really sort of goes to the heart if you tell them they got something wrong. This is like, it's quite cutting. Okay. So when they become imbalanced, it becomes very controlling, opinionated, critical, interruptive, or basically they'll just walk out of the room and vanish, or not deal with it, or just walk away from it. They go away, lick their wounds, reread all the books, make sure they've got everything right, and then come back with a better argument. Okay, so they're not going to hang around and just sort of take it. They're going to, just leave the room and just trying to channel all their energy into really understanding something even more clearly. So the gifts are wisdom. They can gain that kind of inner stillness, conscientiousness, great clarity. They can be great thinkers if they just gives themselves some room or the space to, there's nothing wrong with error. We learn from our mistakes, but I mean, for a thinking type to make mistakes is a pretty terrible thing. So, if they can give themselves that space, they come back and they'll be even sharper. They can sharpen that intellect even more strongly. So they are like two sides of the same coin. What balance is, is going to, whatever benefits is going to help its opposite. You need them to balance each other. And it goes even deeper than that, because their energetics are highly attractive to one another. So even in relationship dynamics, quite often you'll attract your opposite type. So if you are a thinking analytical type, you're going to be more prone to, or you will be more prone to attract the emotional feeling type and vice versa. Now there are, again, there's always caveats to these things, but that's the general. So generally, you know, the polarity is set that we attract our opposite. So even in our relationship, we're attracting things into our life that are helping to balance us, okay? Let's look at some health profiles now. This is probably going to be more interesting for people that are actually wanting to use a system in a health capacity. So let's look, what we'll do first of all is we'll look at the kind of inherent things that we'd expect with these structures, and then how that would play out in an interaction if you're actually dealing with these two different constitutions. So first of all, let's look at structural weaknesses. So if you think about the structure in the emotional feeling type, it's kind of all open spaces, isn't it? It's like openness, hollow spaces, emptiness, wiggliness, waviness. It's that kind of, you know, transparency, like there's something there, but it's a bit indefinable. So generally it's the hollow organs of the body where the energy also collects as well. So let's say for instance, like the stomach, bladder, colon, they're typical kind of sort of hollow organs. They're like a holding space, a bit like these open spaces in the iris. And this is where that charge collects. So quite often we say that the hollow organs are the organs that we associate mostly with this type of constitution. Okay. Now, it's a little bit more involved in that because hollow and solid organs, even from a Chinese perspective, have lots of little caveats as well. Like the heart, you could say, is like it has the open, you know, it has the 4 chambers, but then there's a musculature to it. So it has a little bit of both. And also for the emotional type, we kind of assign more energy to the heart. And for the thinking type, it's more to the brain, obviously, because brain, thinking, heart, emotions. But, you know, outside of that, there's a little bit of playing around with that hollow and solid, but just try and think about the nature of the organ, its sort of compact quality or its spaciousness, okay? We'd also look at the hollowness of the hollowness of the bones, connective tissue in the body, any kind of cavities, nasal cavities, the ear canal, cavities and spaces, the circulatory system, anything that's in motion. Remember these fibers, this kind of waviness, like the Mexican wave, where this energy is like passing through them. So anything that's transporting or communication, sort of a communication system in the body, is more inclined towards this structure. Points of articulation, joints are a big one, particularly inflammation, usually because this is always in motion and moving. So those joints tend to get a bit of a pounding, particularly the knees actually with this particular structure as well. And I've just put there at the bottom, the more lacuna, the more symptomatic. Obviously, the more of these we see in the eye, then the more it's moving towards that. So, you know, as far as the structural weakness goes, this would be a prime candidate for all of these by virtue of the fact there is so many open spaces in this eye, and the fiber's quite loose as well. So again, it's that sort of double whammy. We've got open fibers and loose iris fibers as well. Okay. Let's look at the health profile of the thinking type. So again, the opposite. So it's more the solid organs for this type. This is, we've got liver, spleen, pancreas. Again, we said about the brain, but it's kind of more, this is more like the digestive type as well. So you can think about organs of assimilation as well. I think I've mentioned that. There you go. So the assimilation digestion system, because it's kind of like, if you think about what the mind does, isn't it? We're kind of analyzing and digesting. It's that quality. It's like breaking things down into their component parts and then assimilating them as well. So anything that has that quality in the body, okay? So the muscle, dense tissue of the body, anywhere where there's density. Remember, this structure is moving towards kind of contraction and density all the time. Central nervous system itself, not so much the communication that's moving on the central nervous system, but the actual structure of the central nervous system. And things like the absorption of minerals and things like that, minerals, trace minerals and metals, those kind of things. Again, as I said before, the more psora, the more symptomatic. So this has got quite a lot of psora in this iris. So this would be a pretty good candidate for these. This is the way you'd be sort of thinking about it. You know, that would be and again, it's quite dense fiber on this. So again, that double whammy, we've got dense fiber and we've got colored spots. So again, this would be more something we'd be looking at that would kind of intensify a bit that the way we'd be assessing the person. Okay, so the next thing we can look at is like resistance as well, just the overall. So aside from thinking about colored spots and openings, just the general structure of the eye, how much density have we got there? Is it a low resistance type or is it a high resistance type? So there we go. There's 4 grades of iris fiber, starting from this one, which is quite loose. That's a little bit more dense, but still got lots of openings. That's quite compact, but a few loose fibers here and then. That's pretty dense, that one there, okay? So the more dense and regimented the iris fiber, the more resistance and resilience is shown by the body tissues. The greater the separation looseness of iris fiber, the less resistance and resilience shown by the bodily tissues. That's another thing we could work with as well. And also generally, if you can think about the looser it is, the faster, it's more emotional, energy's dissipating faster, whereas the more it's dense, it's trapping, it's holding things. So this is kind of like those sieves. You know, think about the sieve where you're filtering things. If it's kind of coarse material, a lot of it can move through quite quickly. It's not going to block the sieve. So it can pass a lot of information through quickly, but it's not going to necessarily hold it. Whereas this kind of sieve is very, very fine. It's going to trap everything. It's going to get overloaded. It's going to take a long time for it to process. That's why it's kind of slowing down the assimilation. Okay, so that's quite a big one. We'll look at resistance, you know, and even I tend to equate resistance in an eye to how quickly you can deal with people as well, how quickly a therapy or something can be done. You know, it may be that they're high resistance, so they can take a lot of intense therapy, whereas if it's more sensitive or more open, you're going to have to do it more slowly. You're going to have to work with them slowly. They're going to want to go quicker because by virtue of the fact the fibers are open, they want to move faster. But generally, this one has to be more paced. It's, you know, it's being regimented is the key to success. Okay. So the 2 constitutional types in summary. So just again, remember this is just a general. These are the sort of things that we'd look at. If somebody's coming in and you're dealing with them for the first time, regardless of whatever therapy you're doing, you could be doing body work, homeopathy, Ayurveda, Chinese, or whatever. Remember, you're using this as a constitutional typing. So it's almost working out what type of person has got the disease rather than what disease the person's got, if you know what I mean. So when we're looking, we're just thinking, right, what are the kind of traits that are associated with this constitution and how would it be best to work with them? So the emotional thinking type, the more wavy, the more loose the fibers, the more openings. It's going to be much more agitated and restless. It's more sensitive to others, more sensitive to the environment around them. Seeking instant results, like really fast. They want quick results and they'll lose interest quickly as well. Remember, energy is coming in and passing out quickly. So it's hitting that fine line between showing that they're going to get benefit from it, but at the same time, keeping the treatment interesting or keeping them focused on it and not to lose interest on it. And remember that they like to be seen as well. You know, it's important that you're acknowledging them, that they're there. Remember, this type is like, there's that sort of fear of abandonment or people just like passing them off or letting them go or not interested. So, you know, taking an interest in their case, it's not even like you have to take huge amounts of detailed notes. The fact that they're just being seen is a big grounding force for them. Reacting to the tone of your words. So it may not be that it's not so much what you're saying, it's how you're saying it. So you have to kind of be mindful about how you're speaking. You know, you have to kind of be maybe more upbeat, or to you, it just might be a normal way of expressing. But remember that the tone is what they're kind of tuning in on. Remember, they're the auditory type. So they're really focusing not so much on the content of your words, but the way that you're saying it. Generally, this type tends to feel imbalanced in their body quite quickly, because energy is moving so fast, so they can sense things that are not right, but they also respond to treatment very quickly. But because they respond to treatment quickly, they think, oh, that's it, I'm fixed now, and they go back to all their bad habits. So again, it's kind of like metering that quality of you're giving them information, but at the same time, you've got to sort of temper them in a way that they're not going to just go mad again, like drift back into their old habits again. Generally, this type would need to be seen more often. Remember, they like to be seen and acknowledged, so you maybe see them more regularly. Easily overwhelmed and avoid unrelated information. So, you know, just keep it. There's no need to go into the nth degree. Give clear, concise details, but you don't need to go into anything that's like not connected with that. Keep it on track. Remember, this type by nature will drift off and like to go and chase butterflies around the field. So try and keep it focused and on track, not get too lost and all that. Simple treatment plans, a big one. Don't give them huge amounts to do. Regularity is the key as well. The more that they can be regimented in the lifestyle, the better that, the more energy they're going to hold, the stronger they're going to feel, the quicker they'll recharge their batteries. They're not just going to be leaking energy all over the place. And these last two are quite important. Keep it fun. This type, remember, this is the type, the natural connector. They like to bond with people and they like to sort of feel that there's a sort of great, everyone's enjoying it. We're all along for the ride. We're all having fun. So if you can keep it fun and you can keep it interesting, they'll be much more likely to follow what you're saying. And lots of rewards and treats, sort of like, say, oh, okay, you've been really good this week. You've like kind of stuck to this really rigorous routine, but let's say Fridays, you can let your hair down and go back to having a few things that you shouldn't do, something like that, just to balance it out. Otherwise, if it's not fun, they're going to quickly tire, loses interest quickly, and then they'll just move on to the next healer and see if they're going to offer them something more fun. Okay, so again, we do the sort of 180. So it's kind of the opposite for this type. They're very pragmatic and ordered, self-conscious, self-centered. I don't mean sort of like self-centered mean, but they're kind of much more in themselves. They have that strong mind quality because of the thinking analytical type. They'll expect long-term results, okay? They'll probably have already read up on what you're going to do before you even do it. So expect that they're going to walk into the office knowing stuff. This is a focused and practical type. They like to be heard, so you have to let them speak, even though it might drone on a little bit, sometimes excessively, but try and, you just have to be worried that they like to tell you about what the problem is. And remember, they're visual as well. So they're going to be watching your actions and your expressions all the time. And they're going to be trying to preempt or know where you're already going with it. And that's just a natural quality of that type. It's nothing good or bad. That's just how that type is. Imbalances in their body tend to be felt more slowly. Why? Well, because they've got this density of tissue. So conditions tend to maybe more chronic. They've gone on for a long, long time before they've decided to do something about it. And similarly, it's the opposite to relieve them of that, responding much slower to treatment. So don't expect so much fast results. It can take time. It's got to penetrate down. It's that sieve that's clogged with stuff again. It takes time to wash through and sift and try and remove all the blockages. Needs to be seen with less frequency. Remember, they do quite well. They're kind of more in their own mind and their own thoughts. So you don't need to keep reaffirming. They'll have gone away and remembered what you said. They thrive on more information, even if it's unrelated. So the more information, the better. If you feel you want to go into more detail, that's totally fine. Complex treatment plans, no problem. You can make it nice and complex, but flexibility, give them, remember this type is by nature too constrictive. So giving them a flexibility or choices is going to speed up the plan even more. By giving them some flexibility, you could do this or you could do this, and they can remember all those different things, and it gives them some flexibility. And ultimately, this type is moving towards the opposite, which is the emotional type. So they need more flexibility in their life. Keep it formal, but keep it informative. So you can kind of. It's not so much a fun thing. I mean, it's not that you can't have fun, but it's keep it more formal and relaxed but informative. So lots of information. We're following the plan. That's better. And they respond to any sign of acknowledgement or honoring them for their intellect or their mind or their knowledge. That's always good as well. So, okay, so those are the kind of primary things we'd be looking at with those two constitutions. Remember, we only talked about the constitutions here. That's the base constitutions. So what I've done is here, I've just shown you, I've integrated thinking and the emotional together. So this is obviously two pictures plopped together. It's just to say that the road to healing involves a mixture of expressing our inherent qualities and incorporating our opposites. So this system is based on opposites. So whatever the opposite has got, it's what you need to balance. So if we're an emotional type, if we integrate more of the thinking quality, thinking analytical quality, it benefits us and vice versa. And like I said, the two are automatically attracted to each other as well. So each has the other's answer, if you like. And it's like alchemy, isn't it? When you join it's like taking two things and getting a third, which is like a hybrid of the two. And it's even better than the two collectively. Okay. So let's have a quick look at some iris examples. There we go. So from what we've already talked about tonight, so I've already given you the constitution. So quite clearly we can see it's an emotional feeling. Why? Well, because it's got lots and lots of loose fiber. We've got these big openings here. And when even in the physical model, but even in the behavioral model, we're really interested in obviously the types of shapes that these fibers make as well. So, some of them can be very big, some can be kind of diamond shaped, some have got pockets within pockets, some are like joining together. Some of them look like leaves, some of them don't, and some of them have got quite thick walls, other of them have got thin walls. So all those things would tell us more about the way that the energy is being held in the body. So when we get these very small lacuna, these real tight pockets of energy, they become quite explosive. So what you could say is like that area of the eye becomes highly charged. So it will be triggered by something very specific. Whereas this big one here, it takes up so much space in the eye and it's so big, it's just kind of expansive and reactive, and there's energy flowing all the time. Whereas this is going to be, when it discharges, it will be like a real bang, you'll get a real like wild, kind of explosive charge come out of it. So we're looking at all those qualities as well in the iris. It's not just it really is holistic. We're looking at everything there. Okay, there's the opposite. You can see we've got lots and lots of color patches in this time. So this is definitely thinking analytical. What have we got going on here? This is one of those ones, remember I said you can have both in the same eye. So we've got some lacuna and sora together here, but this is predominantly outweighed by the fact there are many, many sora in here, far more sora than lacuna. And there's a kind of a tightness to the iris fiber as well, a little bit wavy. We would have to factor that in a little bit. See how it darkens towards the edge as well? This is where you're getting there's a little bit of shadowing, natural shadowing in there, and also diminution of fiber or lessening of fiber at the edge. So that would tend to slow things down a little bit more. So there are lots and lots of things that we would read as well as give us additional information. I mean, this kind of yellowing in here, there's like these fatty deposits in here. We can even go as far as looking at some of these sort of blood vessels and things where they're kind of activating or pulling towards certain parts of the eye. I say it's not just the iris, you can use the whole eye, but there's so much information in an iris generally, then, it's more than enough for us to look at here. Okay, so that's just to identify that was a thinking type. So lots of colored patches, different colors as well we'll look at for sora. If they're very dark, the darker these get, then it becomes more like we see them as sort of more transgenerational. It's more like a past. Then we would be thinking more about ancestral stuff in the eye. It's like it's an echo coming back, like a return of something, a missed opportunity or something like that. If they get very orange and bright, it's like they're very immediate, they're highly intensive, really on the go, like gobbling up knowledge, just really sort of super energizing the thinking quality, like making it sort of overdrive thinking. These other ones kind of mixed, some of them are kind of big. The big ones, we put less emphasis on big ones and small ones. So say that this colored area here, the fact that it's so bright and small and orange would be far more powerful than say something like this, which is quite large and a bit browny. Okay, so there's lots of things we can look at with sora, the shapes, the definition. See, these are all very fluffy, these sora as well. They've got no real hard edges to them. Possibly that one and that one have got a bit of an edge, but the rest of all kind of like stains, like superficial, translucent. So again, we would read that in a certain way. Everything would have a sort of an interpretation, but for our purposes, we're just looking at constitution. So we would know that that was thinking analytical. Okay, what have we got there? Primary constitution of the emotional feeling. This is one of those ones where there aren't so many lacuna here. There's probably one decent one there. Guess that could just about be one, but I wouldn't really call it a lacuna. This is kind of like wavy fiber, but there's enough going on here, and there's a looseness to this iris that we would go emotional on this. Now, I know people are going to say, hang on a minute, what about all these colored spots? This is a different, we classify this as a type of ring. When they collect, when you get these kind of peppery, rusty, like patches that accumulate on this is the expression ring that goes around the eye. We get lots of patches on there. that means something else. We're not interpreting them as Sora. So I said there are little caveats here. You've got to learn you just have to learn the way that you're going to interpret it. But stripping away those little tiny colored spots there, I can see that there's a looseness to the fiber. We've got opening here, and here, and I got one lacuna. So it will qualify as a emotional feeling type. But in regards to all that constitutional health stuff and the other stuff, you can see that there aren't many lacunas. So they'd be more inclined to that, but not so much so than, say, this type, which is, got lots and lots of those pockets and lots of that activity going on. Okay, last one there, I think primary constitution. So thinking analytical. Why? Well, because we've got more Sora again, and these are quite orange. These are quite bright and orange. So this would really rev up that thinking analytical quality. They'd be like really hungry for knowledge, asking lots of questions, on the go all the time, going on sort of questioning, talking, trying to get to the bottom of things, very super energized. And the fact we've got these, we've got some openings in there as well. You see, this is one of those ones where you think, well, hang on a minute, I see a few lacuna in there. So is this an emotional type? This is where you'd have to learn the rules for how we balance it out, and in this type, this has actually got more Sora than lacuna. And there's a kind of a straightness to the fiber as well. Although I see there is waviness, there's more straightness. So overall, we would lean this towards a thinking analytical type. And this is one of those ones where it gets close to the center, where you're getting very close to the divide over which way it's going to go. So just a few little key things are tipping us towards thinking analytical and away from emotional feeling. How are we doing for time, Izzy?
So we have 5 minutes.
Oh.
And Janie's got a couple of questions. So I don't know if you want, have you finished?
I think that's it. It was just to say, so yeah, I just put a little thing about the course, but feel free to look at that in whenever you feel like looking at. That's just the kind of things that we cover in the course. That's the first part. So iris topography, which is what we've done tonight, the effects, which we didn't talk about, 4 social types, about the fiber. So it's kind of like the basics of all that you need to know to kind of get you going, but you can study all that at your leisure. So shall I stop share or?
Yeah, why not? Oh no, keep it sharing actually. So
okay.
Because actually I maybe with the questions, and also I think so I just wanted to say, just to remind everyone, there is a discount on the course. It starts on Wednesday, and I'm just going to put discount code on the course in there, because obviously, I mean, that was an incredible amount of information that you've just shared in sort of.
What was it? Oh, sorry about that.
Under an hour.
Should have stopped me if I was rattling on. Once you get going.
No, in a good way, as in like, if you just imagine, 5 weeks of this, you'll be everyone on the call will be flying through with this knowledge.
You get lots of notes. I mean, I've got lots of notes, and you can study it. I mean, it's kind of one of those things you just do at your own pace. You don't have to try and get it all down straight away. You can go back and watch the videos and rewatch the notes. In fact, I had a guy contact me a couple of days ago who did a course about a year ago with me, and he said I never actually got around to watching the video, so he's only just gone back to sort of watch the videos now. So it was enough to read the notes, so I think there was plenty of info.
And the session, yes, the sessions are recorded. You'll get access to them, or you can join live. That was to Bronze's question, but just to go back, I don't know if you can see the chat, but Janie's asked, do the lacuna move from the inside outward? And if so, does this say anything?
Does it say again, does the lacuna move from the inside outwards? Let's find a picture of lacuna. Yeah. Okay. So what was the question? Do they move?
Yes.
No. I mean, the structure in the iris is kind of it used to be taught a long, long time ago that as your diet, lifestyle, or even, working through or processing your emotions, I suppose you could say, the iris would kind of respond to that. Like, it was read more like a dashboard on a car. So it's like a constant readout of what's happening. But I think pretty much everyone's ditched that idea now. There are still a few schools that promote that. I mean, I fall into the camp of the iris. The iris does change, but in subtle ways. So what I would say is that you can add to the iris over time. Color can be added, but structurally, I've never seen any difference. I've been photographing eyes for over 20 years. I've got many eyes I've taken, retaken and retaken. And what you'll see over time is that the eye, there's a kind of natural aging process. You kind of lose a little bit of opacity in it as the colors subtly change. You can see how this one's got some yellowish that's kind of started to overlay. So obviously when they were younger, this would be much brighter and bluer. And then over time, it's got more pigment overlay. These pigment patches, these sora, tend to start forming around the age of 4 and kind of finish up around the age of 12. But that's not always like that. I mean, I've seen them form as late as 50. And if they do, they tend to be the darker ones. But, you know, there's a kind of ongoing process in as much as we're layering down color and also injury to the eye. Like you could think about it as bruising. So I've had cases where an eye's been injured. So something has kind of hit the cornea like a piece of hot dust or something, you know, or a hot spark hit it. And then the area directly below it has begun to discolor, like a bruise beginning to appear and like a yellowness. So even though it's not actually touching the iris, there's a kind of reaction between the iris surface and you know, the kind of cornea or the coverings of the iris as well. So it's highly sensitive. Obviously, it's like it's taking in light all the time, isn't it? And impressions, everything's coming through the eye. So generally, this structure doesn't change. In fact, all of this is pretty much formed before you're born. So this is why we really kind of say lacuna and the actual iris structure are the sort of transgenerational components, and the sora kind of like adaptive components, things that have been added or have come later on to show perhaps a change or a movement in a different direction, or unless they're dark, which is then we kind of look at them more as kind of ancestral again. But no, to answer the question, no, they don't change. The iris is pretty much fixed. Obviously, remember the eye's dynamic. It is dilating and contracting all the time. So it can give the effect that they're moving in and out, but generally the structure is fixed.
And I guess just to follow up on Jenny's third question, so just to clarify, your constitution is set and wouldn't change then?
No, because you could be born, let's say you could be born with with this emotional type here, but let's say you developed literally hundreds of these color patches over time, then that would shift you to the opposite. So as you're growing and you're maturing, you know, you're coming through the formative years, they start forming around 4 years, and then that could change the constitution. So the constitution that's less likely to happen in something like this, because you've got literally so many of lacuna here. It would take a lot of sora to throw this in the other direction. It would be unlikely that this would ever have been a thinking type. However, if you look at, say, this iris before 4, all of these colored spots would, and I say 4 as a kind of a mark. It's not held to that. You know, you could develop them at 2, or it could be at 6, or it might even be at 15. But generally, we see them start to appear around the age of 4, and they seem to sort of lessen after 12, but not, you know, that's not a given. But this would have been a very blue iris, would have lost all this yellow coloration, and all these sora would be gone. So if we removed all the color patches from here, we'd be left with some small lacunas. So this would have been an emotional type by constitution.
And so just, I think this helps with the next question. Would the sora take precedence over the lacuna?
They've got more weight, because if you think about it, they're condensed, aren't they? The pockets, they're sort of, not pockets, sorry, they're like intense pigments, like sort of just patches of solidness. They're kind of constricting and pulling energy in and slowing down. So what we tend to say is when we're counting, for every one sora, we really want to see sort of 2 lacuna really to balance it, because their force is very, very strong. However, you've got to take every pair of eyes as an individual, and you've got to assess. There are lots of other things that we can assess with. So, you know, I'm giving you the sort of the basic tools of identification, but that doesn't mean to say you can just go, oh, it's like this or it's like that. There's sort of tips and tricks that you use to make a final analysis. So it's like you're weighing up all the factors, and then you're coming to a conclusion. And
if I was got a question, to whom would you advise behavioral iridology? Parents, business companies? I think this is like, how would you use it in practice?
Or how would you use it?
Yeah.
Well, lots of different. So the simplest one is just basically if you're dealing with patients, so people coming in, you've got all that information now just by determining their constitution without knowing anything else about them. just looking at the sort of the resiliency of the eye, their ability to heal, and which constitution you're dealing with. Is it some sort of thinking person, or is it some sort of analytical person? Okay. Sorry, thinking or feeling type. So you can determine just that by a quick look of the eye. So that could be really useful, how to communicate with them, how to deal, what kind of therapies are going to be working better for them, or the communication skills for them. So that's all great. The next level would be the social, say like the social types. We didn't even talk about that, but there are four. The two become four, and they fall out into these four social types. And each one of these types would be suited to certain kind of undertakings, or business, or social interactions. So they kind of give us a clue about how, who would be good to put in like the technical department, who would be good to put in the sales department, who would be good to. Now, it's not to say that you can't put anybody anywhere, but it can show you that there's already a propensity towards that, and they would excel in that because they have all the right skills for that kind of thing. So, is this somebody that's going to like to stand over a bench, laboring and machining metal all day and getting it absolutely perfect? Or is this somebody that's just going to be more conceptual, thinking with a drawing board, would that work? Would this work? You know what I mean? Or somebody that actually would be presenting it to the world and, packaging, or somebody actually going out and selling it. So it's useful from that point of view. For just personal interactions, it's useful to determine, the polarities for a relationship attraction. Why are some people attracted to other people? I mean, specifically, the more opposite they go, the stronger the attraction. So if you've got a wild, raging, emotional type, and you've got a super analytical thinking type, the attraction is going to be very, very strong between those two. And if they have iris positions that are the same as well, it shows that there's a kind of a, particularly if they're opposite iris positions, then they're kind of really learning their opposite lessons. And those relationships can be quite challenging. They can be really full on. So, that can be useful as well. So if you're using it for like counseling or relationship, any kind of relationship industry, or, matching people. I know this is tried to be used as I think Jim was looking at doing it as a dating, or part of a dating service or something like that. But it is fun. I mean, and that is a big one as well. Above all, this is fun. It's a nice way to understand, how people, how it all works, how it all kind of interacts and connects. And it's just great for self-analysis as well, looking in to see what's pushing your buttons and what really gets you excited about things and what things really terrify you. And you can see all that kind of quality as well. And ancestral stuff, your parents, you're looking at your children's eyes, even though their constitutions may be borderline and may flip, but that's less, that's less likely. So for education would be really useful, which children are going to excel at more creative things, which ones are going to be more the kind of the number crunchers, all those kind of things are good as well. And then it's just a fun tool. It's a really fun tool.
And I think just leading on to Roz's point, does it mirror the sort of Myers-Briggs Jungian types?
Well, the constitutional, those four social type. I mean, all of those socials, all of those systems are. Yeah, I mean, they're all, there's a crossover between all of them. I mean, you could say it's like earth, fire, air, and water, or whatever. You'll find a way to correlate them. But we break them down into those four because it's a nice, convenient way to think about their energetics. But remember, you are more than your iris structure. This is like your pre-installed software that you come with. If you choose not to run on that software, it's totally fine. But your natural inclination is to run on that way. That's kind of like how you're hardwired. But if you want to break the patterning and move beyond all that, that's totally fine. And integrating your opposite will help you to get the benefits. It's like thinking people have emotions and emotional people think. It's not like if I'm emotional, I can't think anymore. It's just that we're more weighted towards one side or the other. So by bringing integration, you get the best of both worlds.
Will you be sharing these slides?
Sorry?
Will you be sharing the slides?
I don't know. What do you think? Should we share them?
I think
mean and not let anybody have any of them?
Well, yeah, I think everyone will get the recording, and genuine is Andrew's slides for the course are incredible. So I would just say everyone should sign up, and then you'll get all of these plus way more.
I would say, look, I mean, look, I don't know who's in the audience now. I don't know who's watching it, but I guess, look, I would say, yeah, I'm just, please don't sort of just give them away, or I mean, I'm quite happy for people to use it and promote it, and I'll support you if you want to do that. But just, please obviously don't use it for something else. Don't just post it all over the internet. Or it's nicer if people get invited and get a feel for what's going on, and then get interested in the system. I'd rather that people that found it were going to use it and get more interested in it, rather than just putting it out there as whatever and just uploading it.
And so also Tina's asked, do you ever see both emotional and analytical within the same eye, or do you either get one or the other?
Only one. You can only be of one constitution. You'll either be some type of thinking type or some type of emotional structure. That's it. But obviously your opposite will integrate and balance. So you're always trying to integrate the qualities of the opposite. However, I say every now and then you will come across one eye that will be very, very hard to type. There'll just be so many contradictory things there that it could lead you one way or the other. And I've literally had or seen a few people where you could tell them they were thinking type and they would agree. You could tell them they were emotional type and they'd agree. And that's where you've got so close to the point where they cross or they drop on one side of the fence. It literally is on the fence almost. It's not going to be. They're always going to be one or the other, but it's going to be down to your skills as an interpreter to decide which way they're going. But, that's unusual.
And where's that question gone? Yes. In behavioral iridology, does the sclera play a role?
It does. We'll use it, particularly in brown eyes. It can be useful when you get those. Kind of brown pigmentations that actually form close to the drainage channel around the outside. Usually, when they start forming bars, it can be indicators. If you think about it, once we've left the iris, we think of the iris as the body that's sort of floating in the white. The white is like the external world. So once we're into the sclera, where the energy changes, it's like it's picking up vibrations that have come off the iris and gone into the white of the eye, if you like. But it's a different field of activity, although it has some bearing on one another. You can't use it as exclusively or as accurately as if it's in the sclera. But we will look at some stuff in there. Those kind of brown pigmentations. If the capillaries are kind of in, there are a few capillaries that we use, like forked and serpentine and things like that. But that's a kind of an add. Again, that would be like a modifier. It would be something in there that would be of extra interest, but we wouldn't base a constitutional analysis on it.
Lynn. Hi, Lynn. She's an alchemist as well. Does long or short-sightedness, flatness of cornea, etc., play a role in the constitution?
That's not something we would be really looking at, no.
Okay. So Barbie has asked, one or sora stronger than several? I think that's to your point. Is one sora stronger than several? Is that
one? We kind of rate them all on. So if I was looking at this, let's look at this example here. If I was looking at this one, the ones that would interest me would be this one here with the arrow and this little one down here. This would interest me because it's very bright and orange, and it's also sitting right on the edge of this lacuna. So what I've got is I've got two opposite charges together. So that's like a sort of a dynamite and a fuse. So that would be pretty powerful, and that's a key point of interest. And this one here, again, because it's close into the mental area, as we move into, there's lots of different zones in the iris, but this is like the mental zone. It's very orangey, and it's in quite a strong area. It's like the heart area as well of the iris. So it's kind of like an intra or outer heart area. It would be of interest as well. I'd probably focus on those two, but that's something you just learn to identify. Of course, everything means something, but I wouldn't go into the nth degree and start describing every single thing in this eye. That we got one here, we got one here, they're all interesting, but they're all telling you the same thing. This is a thinking type. So unless you specifically want to go into one area of their life and talk about it more, but these two of all of them shine to me, they kind of shine out and asking to be talked about more. So these are things that I would focus more in on.
Nadia has asked, okay, the dark brown sora in the outer circle, was it ancestral but not in the ancestral area? How can you use that? What does it tell you?
If you've got dark brown sora, particularly when they move into this outer third of the iris, it's all about blocking. So that's like, we call them resentment sora. They have their own interpretation. So that can be things that have gone on between like father and son, mother and daughter, like ongoing issues where it's like, it's sabotage. You know, I'm not gonna say no, but I'm not gonna do it. and the squarer and more blocky they are, the more that energy pervades. So that would be a transgenerational trait because it was dark, but we'd also read it as some type of sora, and it was having a blocking effect. So yes, I mean, things that go on inside and I don't want people to think, oh, it's, you know, just because it's the ancestral area, you can start reading about every type of grandparent and stuff like that. You can see influences. We divide the eye up into certain sectors and we assign certain lines in the family to those areas, but it gets more like guesswork. It's kind of questioning. You could just see the qualities or the energetic that somebody is calling, or somebody's making a noise, or somebody's having an influence over something. And of course, that's going to then affect an organ or an emotion, you know, that's occupying that part of the eye as well.
That's so cool. I love that. Janice has also asked, can you recommend any books for further education?
I think any books on iridology are quite good to read. There's lots and lots out there. Just look at the age of them, because obviously the older ones, like I say, some of the older ones focus a lot on this idea of the dashboard of the eye. You know, if you start drinking orange juice every day, then you'll turn a brown eye back into a blue eye and stuff like that. So just be slightly wary of that. But they have still got some good information in them, and they can give you good, I just teach you about looking at the eye and traits, various traits that you'd be looking at. In terms of the behavioral stuff, I mean, I've got a book I'm writing at the moment, which will be out probably next year. I was going to self-publish it, but I've had a publisher approach me and asked me to do it with them. So that's kind of changed the game now. So now I've got to do it all really properly and cross the T's and dot the I's. So it's going to take a little bit longer, but that should be finished by the end of the year. So that'll be out. And if you can still get a copy of Jim's book, Jim Burgess. His book is just behavioral iridology. I sort of helped him write, or not helped him with that book about 2008, 2007, I think it came out. So you might still be able to get a copy of that. It's quite basic. It's like 100 pages with a lot of color pictures in. But that's a good general one just to sort of get going on. There's the RAID book, which is still probably available if you go to the RAID website. I think you can sign up for it and get a free copy as a PDF, but obviously you're going to give them your contact details. I'd just be slightly cautious of the RAID because, I mean, it's amazing, and the guy who came up with it's amazing, but it's a little bit, I think it's a little bit confusing. I think there are things in there that are will actually be better off not knowing. It would confuse you more. That particular system uses a 4-type system, and then it gets more confusing. I would say, look, if it's free, it wouldn't do any harm to download it and read it and see how you get on with it. It was written a long time ago. It's like 1979. It's a little bit out there, you know, a bit slightly cosmic. But if you can kind of rattle through it, there's good information in there still. I wouldn't not read it. But other than that,
put a link to your course again. I've just put a link to your course again to say that because obviously what Andrew has is the 5-week course, which will cover all the foundations, so going to a lot more depth than we've done tonight. But then you also, once you've done that, there is an intermediate and an advanced course, which basically will take you through everything that you need to know about behavioral iridology. So yeah,
I tried to break it down to 3 parts. So you've got like a beginners, intermediate, and advanced. So yeah, I mean, otherwise you just don't want to get, it's a lot of information, and it's better just to go through it a step at a time. And you know, this is the primary stuff we've covered tonight. Basic constitution. This should be the very sort of ground level of the course, because identifying, thinking, and feeling is like the beginning of everything. Once we've got that down, everything else is a logical progression.
And oh, where are the questions? Okay. Oh, Ivana said that was really nice. You answered my question to understand species perfectly. Thank you, Andrew. Karina says, absolutely amazing information. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. And Tina said, thank you. Janie's got another question. Do you hold an iridology session online?
A few of the students from the last or the course before had asked to, they said that they wanted to start getting pictures together, and maybe we could do a like sessions where people could bring irises and we could just talk about them. So I said, yeah, that maybe could work. I think the thing with that is the problem is good pictures. You can see this is the kind of image I'm used to working with. So you need quite good detail. If we could get, I mean, maybe for the future, if people can get some good images together. Oh, I forgot to say there's the iridology forum. If you join my behavioral iridology forum on Facebook, that's free to join. I quite often post a lot of stuff in there and talk about them. Some of them are quite lengthy. So that's a free thing you can join, have a look through, see if it interests you.
And just in case Janie's question was about the actual consultation, what would you do if you've got a patient that wants iridology done and it's online? What would you recommend for them to do to get a good picture?
There is an app. Somebody sent me a link for it. I can't remember what it was called. There is an app that you can download, which actually takes a fairly decent picture. It's not like anything like this, but it's kind of good enough to get a basic idea of what's going on. So that's one of those ones where you download it, take the picture, but you don't send it off, because if you send it off, you have to join and then pay money. But I think if you take the picture and then just grab the screen, it works. It's actually quite good. Again, I can't remember the name of the software, but if you go on my forum, I was
going to say, I just found the link to your forum and then I went in it, and it's called iCos selfie.
Is it? I can't remember. I just tried it a couple of times. I thought actually it's not bad.
And I've just posted, here we go, Yolanda, iCos iSelfie, and I've just posted a link to the Facebook forum in chat if anyone wants to join that. Yeah.
And then you got these kind of Chinese gadgets, like their sort of video cameras that you cup over the eye. They take reasonable pictures. I mean, the big thing is photographs, isn't it? Getting a good picture.
So actually, this leads on quite well to Sam's question about what thing do you use to recommend to take pictures?
This is just an SLR. Well, I say just an SLR. It's quite an expensive one, a reasonable mid-range SLR. It's a £400 or £500 camera. The lens is a 105 macro. I got a Sigma, I think, to do this, and then the clever bit is on the end. It's like a cone with optical cable, so it can project the flash down, and you get a nice flat. Because in behavioural, we're kind of interested in a nice flat image, whereas physical, sometimes they like to sidelight to get more definition on the eye. But obviously you're talking a bit of money for that. It gets expensive. So I would just say, until you're kind of ready to take that step, it might be better just to buy one of the sort of cheaper cameras, one of those £100 Chinese ones, just to sort of take images and start getting used to it. And if you feel it's something you want to expand and spend more time with, you could go out and buy a proper iris camera. I think if you go to Miles Research, the guy's called John Miles. It's Miles Research is the company. He's a kind of specialist for building and custom building, and he does a huge range of cameras. So if you speak to John, he's got lots on offer. I mean, maybe he might have stuff and he could actually custom build or modify, or if you've got this, he could make that for you. I mean, he's pretty good with his hands, so he can pretty much make anything. So that's something else you could look at. I just spend the money on it because I enjoy it, and it's something I enjoy looking at and working with. So for me, it was worth it. But until you're sure it's what you want to do, I wouldn't go spending huge amounts of money on cameras.
Amazing. So we've obviously overrun, but I wanted to make sure everyone got their questions answered. So thank you, Andrew, so much for your time with that. I think I think we've covered all the questions. So I'm assuming everyone, no more questions. So this is good. So no, sorry, more questions the merrier, but I appreciate everyone have got evenings to go to. So thank you so much, Andrew, for all your time and wisdom and all this incredible information you've put in for us, which is just mind-blowing. And I, for one, really excited to learn more. Everyone that does want to learn more, obviously, Esther said she uses the Dynalite iriscope. That's
Dynalite.
Yeah.
Is that one of those? Yeah, it might be one of those. Is it one of those sort of like a video camera that sort of cups on? Oh, I know. The Dynalite's is like a microscope, isn't it? Like yeah, it's a USB microscope, I think.
Don't know. So basically, I am. Yeah, that just leaves me to say thank you everyone so much for joining. Andrew, how can people, we've got the links to the forum. I've sent everyone the links to the course.
There's the contact information there. So I got Facebook for behavioural iridology. There's an Instagram page, although the Instagram one I don't tend to put any text on it now. I just post the picture and then say go visit Facebook and read on it. And there's my website, behavioural.iridology.com. Don't forget to put the U in it if you're from the States. behavioural.iridology@gmail.com to contact. And I think that's as much as I can think today.
Perfect. Well, I think that's really helpful for everyone that's joined. So thank you again. And everyone stay in touch. And just to let you know, from the AMH perspective, we do have a course on CBD starting tomorrow as well. But I will get the recording out to everyone probably in the next couple of days. And thank you all so much for joining, and take care.
Thank you.
Right. Actually, Andrew, you're recording, so you'll probably want to
stop share. And
or stop
what do I do? Just press stop. There we go.
Yeah.